It had to be tough, being a leader of a large army during this war. Perhaps it had to be far tougher to be leader of an army from a small nation, trying to fight off one many times larger. If you can do that, you know you're good. And one of the men who did was Stepa Stepanovic. I'm Indy Nidell. Welcome to a Great War bio special of Who Did What in World War I, today featuring Stepa Stepanovic. He was born in the Serbian village of Kumodraz near Belgrade, March 11, 1856, the fourth child of Ivan and Radojka Stepanovic. At this time, Serbia was not an independent nation, but an autonomous province within the Ottoman Empire. The last Ottoman soldier would officially leave Serbia in 1867, but it would take the Congress of Berlin in 1878 to make Serbia its own nation. After elementary school, Stepa moved to Belgrade, where he took classes and worked as a servant to wealthy families. At the age of 18, he joined the Belgrade Artillery Academy. One of the other 29 cadets there was the future Field Marshal Živojin Misic, who would also distinguish himself during the First World War. By 1876, Stepanovic was a lance sergeant, but his education was interrupted by the First Serbo-Turkish War that year. Serbia's goal was to liberate all parts of the Balkans where Serbs lived under Ottoman rule. Stepa was sent to the front, where he fought in a series of battles, making a name for himself as a soldier and becoming a sub-lieutenant. At the village of Nishor, it was Stepa who first entered the Ottoman trenches, and for his bravery was awarded the St. Stanislav third-class medal with swords and ribbon. Throughout his career, he would say that it was the medal of which he was the most proud. After independence, Stepa returned to Belgrade to finish his education. He graduated in 1880 and was given a company command. That same year, he met Jelena, who he would marry the following year and with whom he would have 2 daughters. He saw further action in the Serbo-Bulgarian War of 1885, and after that served in Kragujevac and Valjevo, becoming a captain first class by the end of the decade. Both he and his former classmate Misic took the exam for Staff Major General in the spring of 1892. He successfully passed the exam and by 1901 was in Belgrade as a headquarters colonel and professor of military history. One thing to note about Serbia in the early 1900s. The Serbian political and military situation was constantly in flux, with sabotages, assassinations, and conspiracies between various factions. During the May 1903 coup, King Alexander was killed and King Petar I Karađorđević from a rival dynasty took the throne. Stepanovic, however, was apolitical and uninterested in the internal conflicts, which may well have saved his career. He was, though, a very strict disciplinarian who tolerated not even the slightest disobedience. He also fought against the exploitation of soldiers by their superiors, and all things that had no place in the army. For example, officers sending enlisted men out to get them food or perform household chores. His belief there was so unpopular with fellow officers that they tried to secretly have Stepa arrested, but he discovered their plot and had 31 of them arrested for conspiracy. In 1907, he was promoted to general, and in 1908 became Serbian Minister of Defense. He began a program of general modernization and reorganization of the Serbian army, though he was initially skeptical of modern arms. Serbia purchased the bulk of its new equipment from France. There were very good relations between the two. Stepa was dismissed as defense minister in 1909, unofficially over public disagreements over any actions of war that should be taken against Austria-Hungary for annexing Bosnia. Stepanovic did not believe the time was right for opposing such a large nation. This was not a popular sentiment. He would again become minister in 1911, and with his support, Serbia concluded its alliance with Bulgaria, Montenegro, and Greece as they began the First Balkan War against the Ottoman Empire. Stepanovic was commander of the Second Combined Serbian Army, which was 1 Serbian and 1 Bulgarian division. There were problems with him consolidating his command, though, as his Bulgarian division refused to receive direct orders from him, and only through Bulgarian high command. Still, though, it was his forces that broke the siege at Adrianople, and Stepanovic who was considered a hero. Standing alone like a statue, General Stepanovic suddenly transferred himself to the trenches of his countrymen, the peasants from 7th Company. From time to time, he clapped his hands and saluted, "Bravo, my sons! Bravo, my heroes!" Adrianople fell in late March 1913, and this was nearly the end of the war. But when Serbia and Greece divided Macedonian land between them that they had previously agreed to share with Bulgaria, it led to the Second Balkan War that summer. Stepanovic also saw action there, and after that weeks-long war ended, his Second Army was demobilized. And then the following year, Franz Ferdinand was assassinated, and this war began. As the July crisis came to a head, Serbian Army Chief of Staff Radomir Putnik was on a medical treatment holiday in Austria-Hungary, so it fell to Stepanovic for organizing the mobilization of the Serbian army. The main problems he faced were lack of ammunition and terrible finances after the two Balkan wars. Still, he managed to mobilize 250,000 men in 3 armies, and by August the 10th, they were in position to receive the first Austrian offensive. Putnik returned, and Stepanovic took command of the Second Army. Opposing him was Austro-Hungarian Imperial General Oskar Potiorek, who had never seen a single day of battle and who thought defeating Serbia would be a brief autumn stroll. Potiorek crossed the Drina River the 12th, but straight from the start, the Austrians had big problems with the terrain and Serbian guerrilla fighters. Stepanovic saw the strategic importance of the mountain Cer and ordered a surprise night attack on the Austrians the 15th. The following battle was extremely bloody and in appalling weather, but after a couple of days, the Serbs broke the Austrians, and by August 24th, there were no Austrian soldiers left on Serbian soil. The Battle of Cer was the first Allied victory in Europe of the war, and Stepa Stepanovic was immediately promoted to Field Marshal. A second Austrian invasion attempt in September was unsuccessful, but by late October, the Serbian army was exhausted and nearly out of artillery shells. The third Austrian invasion attempt began November 16th, the largest of the 3. The 3 Serbian armies, including Stepanovic's second, retreated further and further into the country, and on December 1st, Belgrade fell. However, weapons and artillery shells finally began arriving from France through Greece, and the counterattack began December 3rd. Austria-Hungary was stunned, and the Second and Third Armies retook Belgrade the 15th, and the Austrians were again forced to flee the country. But there was a high price to pay. Casualties were in the hundreds of thousands, not even including civilian victims of atrocities. Also, there was a typhus epidemic that would rage for months and prevent any military adventures in Serbia for most of a year. In October 1915, the Austro-German combined offensive into Serbia proved too powerful to resist, and the Second Army was broken at Niš. We've talked a lot in the regular episodes about the Serbian Exodus through the Albanian mountains before finally regrouping on Korfu, so I won't go into it here. Stepanovic, though, would figure in the Macedonian campaign until the fall of 1918, which again we'll cover in the regular Thursday episodes. By the end of the war, Stepa Stepanovic was a huge national hero. He retired in 1920 and moved to the family home at Čačak. He was uncomfortable with fame, and he thought his pension was way too high. He gardened, he played with his grandchildren, and he took long walks by the river. And Stepa Stepanovic died April 27, 1929. His funeral was a huge event with state, religious, and military honors. Yugoslav King Alexander was there in person, and Stepanovic was buried with the French Legion of Honor, the Greek Order of the Redeemer, the Russian Order of Holy George, the British Order of Bath, the Serbian Order of Karađorđe, and of course, his old St. Stanislav medal from his youth. Stepa Stepanovic's influence on Serbian society is enormous. You can see it today in all the streets, places, songs, schools, and more dedicated to his memory. He was a tough old bird, all right, and his army was instrumental in winning the first Allied European victory of the war. That he was still around fighting and commanding troops at the very end of the war is truly impressive, especially when you look at the high commands of the other warring nations and the fact that Serbia was overrun and occupied. Look him up to learn more. He is actually a really good read, and there's a lot that we don't have time to cover. Today was just a brief look at Stepa Stepanovic, an often overlooked leader who who should not be quite so often overlooked. We'd like to thank Igor Lazarovich for helping us with the research for this episode. If you'd like to know more about the tensions between Serbia and Bulgaria, check out our Bulgaria special right here. And do not forget to follow us on Twitter and Instagram. See you next time.